Reddit, what is the most unexplained thing that has ever happened to you? I survived a car crash as an infant after being ejected 100 plus feet from the car, without so much as a scratch. I was still in my car seat when the police found me. My dad wasn't so lucky, and he broke his neck. He was in a halo for quite a while. The driver that hit us was driving stealth, no headlights on at night, and was absolutely hammered. When I was 14, my dad and I were home alone, as my mom and brothers went to visit the grandparents. One morning, I woke up and got ready to go round a friend's house. Dad said he wasn't feeling too great and that he was going to have a lie down. Didn't think anything of it and went to my friend's house. On the way there, I had this feeling of dread and fear that I couldn't quite pin down, so I phoned my mom and told her that Dad and I were all right. But he felt ill. Nothing unusual at all. Dad was ill quite a lot with headaches and whatnot. When I actually got to my friend's house, I was there no longer than 5 minutes when the feeling of dread got overwhelming. I felt like the world was closing in on me and that I was about to die. Fear welled up in me, and it was impossible to ignore it. I left and walked home, not ran. I don't know why. The whole way back knowing, not thinking. I knew it as if it had already happened, that I was going to find something at home that I didn't want to. I've also just realized typing this that I didn't phone my dad as I walked home. I think I wanted to stave off what I was going to discover as long as possible. I got to the corner near to my house and freeze. A big hedge separates my house from the path, and I didn't want to go around because I knew what was on the other side. I could see it in my mind. A few minutes go past, and I eventually manage the few steps around the hedge and my heart drops. An ambulance is sitting on my drive. The fear and dread disappeared instantly, and everything just seemed to become calm. I walked past the ambulance, still don't understand why I didn't look in it first, and into the house. The living room is a mess. My dad's computer chair is on its side, and everything on his desk is scattered onto the floor. I calmly walk through each room in the house, but no one's in any of them, so back out to the ambulance. I knock on the doors and the wait seems like an eternity. I didn't want them to open. Once they're opened, it's over. But they do, and there's my dad, alive, sitting up on the bed, grinning with the paramedics. I can remember saying, "That's my father," and then getting into the ambulance. I was angry, confused, and relieved all at the same time. For the last half an hour, my mind had convinced me that I was going to find something life-changing at home. But here he was perfectly, at the time, all right. When I'd left for my friend's house, my dad had went on to his computer and suddenly thought that he was having a heart attack. He phoned 999 and tried to describe what was happening, but he passed out, and the next thing he remembers is the paramedics scooping him off the floor and taking him into the ambulance. Turns out his aorta was slowly but surely tearing away from his heart, and he was rushed into surgery. They chucked an artificial valve in him, and 10 years later he's fit as a fiddle. I'll never be able to explain what I felt and why I drawn back home. I don't believe in anything supernatural or spiritual, so coincidence, I guess. A bloody weird coincidence. I had a girlfriend once who, whilst discussing this exact topic, admitted in a very embarrassed tone that she thought her previous house was haunted. All the usual stuff. Closed latch doors opening on their own, footsteps and no one there. Until one day she woke up to get a drink at night and saw an apparition of man in his late 40s, well-dressed, standing at the top of the stairs. She blinked a few times to make sure she wasn't imagining shadows in the dark, but he was there, looking down the stairs. He turned and walked away. She grabbed a bat and ran upstairs afterwards, but he was gone. Creepy enough, right, but easy enough to disregard and nod and smile politely, with the disclaimer that the universe is full of unexplained crap and anything's possible, etc., etc. A year later, we're at this party and meet a random guy who it turns out lived in the same suburb as that. Turned out to be the same street. Turned out to be the same house. Guy kind of looks around awkwardly and says, "I don't want to sound weird or anything, but did you see the ghost at the top of the stairs?" We had never met this guy and had no common friends, and I was the only person she'd ever told about it. Freaked me the freak out. My story is from my first tour in Iraq. We were stationed not far from Baghdad at the time. Our sector had had some heavy activity a couple months earlier, and as a result, There was a 2200 closing of checkpoints set at most crossroads in the area. No in, no out. This was followed at 2400 by a strict off-street curfew. On this night, we were lucky enough to have patrol duty instead of manning one of those points. At about 22:30, we have pulled to the side of the road to mount over watch for a while, when a minivan slowly pulls up. An honest-to-God Astrovan-style minivan. Iraq has vans of many makes and types. However, Iraq does not have soccer mom mobiles. Weird but not too weird. Still cautious, could be anything. Probably just a local trapped on the wrong side of the CP, trying to beg through. However, next comes the driver. I move forward to try and puzzle out what he wants. The driver asks in flawless American accented English, "Hey, are the roads closed ahead?" I had expected broken English begging me to help him through the very closed checkpoint ahead. The best I could stammer was something like yeah, as eloquently as possible. His response, again in a perfect American accent, "Well dang. Oh well, you have a good night now. Catch you later, buddy." I'm paraphrasing him, but I distinctly remember him calling me buddy as he drove off. I remember because as I wondered about his car, and the conversation, I saw his license plate. It was from Florida. To this day, I don't know who that stranger was, but I wonder if he wasn't just some guy who got really lost and refused to ask for directions. Good luck to you, traveler. I hope you finally found your way home. When my sister and I were kids, we were out front of our home, playing near the mailbox. Mom and Dad were there by the window watching, and according to them, my mother turned to my father and asked him to bring us inside. He shrugged her off, but she became more urgent. He asked why it was a problem, and she suddenly panicked and started heading towards the front door despite being less than a week away from giving birth to our youngest sister. He stopped her and stepped outside to call us in, and we complied. Less than a minute later, a car came barreling down the street at high speed and struck our mailbox, destroying it. We would have both been killed instantly. My parents have never felt entirely comfortable talking about it. There's something odd about a parent's intuition. My mom was picking up my little sister from the ballet once, sitting in the left turn lane at a red light. She'd sat at many times a week over the past several years. Then one day, she decided that something felt wrong about the intersection she was sitting at. She took a right turn on red, rather than waiting to take the left turn on green. Less than 10 seconds after she decided to change her course, she heard an accident in the intersection. Someone had run the red light and T-boned a car that had waited to take a left on green. She claims she knew something bad would happen at the intersection that day, and taking a different turn could have saved her and my sister's life. We have had strange stuff happen around the house that is hard to explain. My wife thinks we have a ghost. I can usually rationalize what happened, except for the pizza box incident. We had ordered pizza. After eating it, we put the empty box in the trash can, turned 90, and went to bed. I wake up in the middle of the night to a flash of light that had lit up the whole house. Kinda like lightning, WO, and thunder. Try to go back to bed. Hear a strange either walking or knocking type sound. I get up and go into the kitchen. The pizza box is in the middle of the kitchen floor, about 10 away from the trash can. I stood there for 3 minutes, never had a logical explanation. Right? Well, I doubt this will get seen, but all the comments here are all creepy. So I'll share a somewhat nice one. When I was very young, I had violent diarrhea and vomiting for a couple of days. My mom took me to my grandmother, who was a nurse. She took one look at me and rushed me to the hospital. I was so dehydrated that I couldn't even drink on my own. I came very close to death at one point, but I recovered eventually. A couple of weeks later, my mom and grandmother were talking about my stay at hospital. My mom said something along the lines of how the doctors brought me back, when I apparently piped up and corrected her. No, it was Granddad. He pulled me out of the hole. My grandfather had passed a few years earlier. My mother said my grandmother just closed her eyes and smiled. I can't remember any of it since I was so young, but I still think about it every now and again. My grandmother saved my life. I'm glad I was able to somewhat repay her by making her happy that day. She passed a few years later. I'd like to think she and my grandfather are together and happy. Cheers, Nanny and Granddad. About 3 years ago, I was helping a friend move. It was a historic home that had been empty for years and years, built in the 1850s, I believe. The moving truck was a day late. Surprise. so I ended up sleeping on an air mattress. I conked out early, like 8 p.m., while she went out for drinks. I wake up because the air mattress moved about a bit and had gotten firmer, like something had sat on the bed. I kicked my foot around thinking it was my friend back from the bars. Nothing. But the mattress gets squishy again. I try to go back to sleep, and about 10 minutes later it starts happening again. Being awake, I realized it felt like my dog getting ready for bed. Circle, 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 pause, circle, pause, circle, pause, circle, oculatum. I could feel the individual steps. Obviously, there were no animals in the house. I thought about pulling out my cell phone or getting up, but decided whatever seemed benevolent. So I went back to sleep. I didn't mention it to my friend at the time. She gets creeped out real easy, and I didn't want to ruin her new home. About a year later, she gets a dog, Suzuki, and I'm visiting her for the first time since the move. Woohoo, upgraded to a real bed and everything. A pair of shoes gets eaten by the under the bed space, so I flop on the floor and stick my hand under the bed to get them. Something licks my hand, whatever. Suzuki clearly snuck under the bed. Pull up the bed skirt, no Suzuki, but a dozen or more dog toys. Weird. I mention it to my friend, who gets real quiet. She doesn't know how the toys keep getting in the guest room. She has to keep it closed because Suzuki kept going in there and barking and scratching up the original wooden floor, playing so hard. My conclusion: lonely and friendly dog, cat, ghost. I tried to convince her to leave the door open, but she won't. Doesn't let guests sleep in there anymore. Makes me sad thinking the ghost is lonely. TL, doctor. Evidence of a lonely ghost dog that just wants a friend. I was having a dream I was in my bed, and a brown fish was flying around the room. It then flew into my face, and I woke up like I had been hit in the face and feel slimy. I look at the ground and spot something foreign. Get up, turn on lights. A dead small fish on the ground. I was alone. No one believes me. At least the fish believes you. I have a witness for this event, and he doesn't have a way to explain it either. I was sitting in my room at my computer talking to my roommate, who was standing next to me. My computer was right beside the door to my room at the time. I was idly flipping a quarter about in my fingers when I dropped it. Both of us saw it fall, saw it hit the floor and heard it bounce. It went about a half a foot back into the air and then vanished. Both of us saw it disappear. We searched everywhere for it. We never found it. We even made a point of looking for it when I moved out, searching the area and anywhere it could have bounced to. Never found it. Once when I was a kid, I was just rubbing two quarters together randomly, pressing them tight together and doing that for a while. Suddenly, a third quarter appeared in between the two of them. What I'm saying is, I think I owe you 25 cents. The weirdest and most unexplainable thing happened to my youngest sister when she was probably 2-3 years old. My Uncle Ben had passed away, and we were at his funeral. After the funeral, we had a gathering for friends and family at a friendship center, basically a hall-type building. After a while, someone noticed that my youngest sister was missing. So we're searching this building frantically for probably 20 minutes. Someone eventually starts checking the rooms in the area as well. I remember someone said they heard some laughing coming from one of the rooms, but the door was locked. So we searched for a key, but couldn't find one and eventually just took the door off. When we opened the door, she was alone and perfectly fine. When we asked her what was doing, she said Uncle Ben wanted to play, and she followed him into the room. Probably one of the only unexplainable things to happen to me, but at least it was a good one in a way. My youngest sister, who is 10 or younger than I, was one when our dad died suddenly. She was a complete daddy's girl, but too young to understand. For several months following his death, she would talk to him, point, laugh, and say dada while looking past us. It was oddly comforting and kind of creepy too. Used to rent a large house with 2 friends, and often heard footsteps upstairs when we were all downstairs or any one of us were alone. Just put that down to it being a large old house. Also found that objects from the basement, which was full of crap, would occasionally appear around the house. But because we always had friends hanging around in the house, just figured it was one of them. But one night around 2 a.m., we were all awoken by a loud smash. All came out our rooms, and the lad who had the room furthest down the corridor was saying the mirror on the wall had smashed. He seemed really freaked out, but me and the other lad didn't see what was so scary about a mirror falling off the wall. Probably a loose nail. But then he explained the mirror frame was still on the wall, but the glass within it had just exploded. I have a million stories I could tell, but I'm feeling nostalgic today, so I'll share this one. In 2011, my great-grandmother was very, very sick. She had just turned 90 and had been in a loopy state for a few years. She was suffering from internal bleeding, but the tests to figure out where would have likely killed her. So she was doped up on morphine. It was so sad, truly. Mix that in with dementia. Anyway, my husband and I had stopped by to see her in the hospital to say our final goodbyes. She barely remembered who I was, but her eyes were very loving. We spent a great deal of time with her, just by her side, knowing this was her deathbed. After a long time, I went to lean in and give her a kiss. She whispered in my ear, "You're going to be a great mother. She's going to be so lucky to have you." My husband heard it too. I was taken aback. She couldn't have known that we were struggling with infertility issues or my desire to be a mother. I was a little upset because I had given up hope of ever being a mom. I chalked it up to her dementia, kissed her head, let a tear fall, told her I loved her and walked out the door. A few days went by and I planned on stopping back again but had work conflicts. The family let me know she was still holding on by a thread, and I wished she would let go because I hated seeing her in so much pain. That night I had a dream, a very vivid one. In the dream, I was a small child. My great-granny was there, in a flowing white dress with beautiful white hair. She had me sit on her lap. She kissed my forehead, told me she loved me, and then said if you were any bigger, I'd put you in my pocket, something she'd always said to me. I cried into her chest, told her I didn't want her to go, but she told me she'd always be with me. Then she disappeared. When I woke up, the first thing I did was call my grandmother, my great-granny's daughter. Before she could say anything, I frantically told her about my dream, down to every last detail. She paused, sighed, and said, "Honey, your great-granny passed last night around midnight. Maybe she was stopping by to say goodbye." I was taken aback. I was raised religious, but I'm not religious. I remember thinking that I wish I could believe she stopped by to see me on her way to the other side. But those were just delusions. I missed her terribly and cried. A few months went by. New Year's of 2012 hit, and I tried to have a beer with my husband, but I got sick. I was very tired, cranky, and sick. Everything I ate came right back up. I was convinced it was the flu, until a friend told me I was pregnant. I told her, "You know I can't have kids," but I took a test just to pacify her, and my own curiosity really. Lo and behold, the second line came up immediately. I was pregnant. My husband and I went to the doctor's office a couple weeks later and saw our tiny baby on the ultrasound. We found out our due date was late August, the same day my great-grandmother had passed. I was shocked. What were the chances? Now I'm the proud mama of an almost 2-year-old daughter who has my great-granny's distinct little nose. She looks so much like her, it's amazing. I can't help but wonder if my granny knew something I didn't. She said the word "she" when she spoke of me being a mother. Coincidence? I'll never know, but I like to think she's still with me, despite my lack of religion. I went to go help my uncle clean out his cousin's house after one of them passed away. They were hoarders, so they kept everything under the sun, including bags of trash. Well, after a few hours, and barely making a dent, I went upstairs to go take a leak. After I was done, I washed my hands and go to use the towel which hung under a wall-length mirror. I look in the mirror and I see a guy, maybe 40s, behind me. Apron on, blood on it, handlebar mustache, epic, hair parted down the middle. I mean to a T, I remember him today. I turned, he's gone. I haul ass downstairs, tell my mom. She laughs it off like I'm some sort of ghost whisperer. We go into the basement to start there. Full-on butcher station, and aprons hanging from apparently the guy who built the place in the 1900s. Seems like a good enough time to tell my how I got my username story. I was 13, camping with my family on the border of Alaska and Canada. I think it was June, just about dusk. And if you know anything about Alaska, you'll know that was quite late. We'd been listening to what sounded like bear noises, moans, grunts, and caterwauls like you'd hear from baby bears coming from the woods all evening. This isn't a terribly abnormal thing in Alaska, but still sent a shiver down our backs. My younger sisters and my mother and I were setting up the tent, and all of a sudden a bunch of birds freak out and fly out of the forest about 150 yards away. We all turned that way to look at the sound, and just as we do, something crosses a clearing from where the birds flew. In the clearing, there stood one tree with branches starting higher up, and as the thing, we thought it was a human, walked upright on two legs, arms swinging, etc., crossed. Its head just came up to the lowest branch. We automatically assumed it was my 62 brother going into the woods to pee. It was one of those moments you see in a movie. I said, "That must be Blake," and not 2 seconds later, our brother shows up behind us, asking why we look so startled. So then we rationalized it by saying it must have been someone else going into the woods. My brother went over to the clearing to check it out, and as we stood and watched, we realized how huge the thing was. Blake was about half its bulk and came about 2 feet short of the lowest branch that the thing's head brushed. He came back shaky and clearly startled. My brother, the skeptic, said he heard something very heavy running very fast through the woods. TL doctor, I've seen Bigfoot. That's the only semi-rational conclusion we've been able to reach. It would explain the noises and whatever huge, man-shaped creature crossed that clearing. And that's it for today's stories. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced something that you just couldn't explain? Let me know down in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more Reddit stories. Click the video on your screen to watch another crazy thread right now. See you next time.